Looks like Scott just arrived as well. All right, can you all see my screen? Excellent, thank you. So I'm just going to kind of walk through, but you're welcome to ask questions at any point. I also am setting up some, or have started the process of setting up some usability testing just to get some feedback on these, as well as evaluating our current process. So some of these designs might change a little bit, but I don't anticipate any big changes. However, Gabe is here as well. So Gabe, if there's anything that I have missed or have misunderstood in terms of the requirements, please let me know. So this is just a standard checklist currently, and some of you may have seen some of the designs previously where you hover over one of these, and I'll just zoom really quickly just so you can kind of see. You hover over one of these and you get a little ellipsis menu, and that has more options. So in this case, it has a convert to task option, and when you select that, I'm just going with a modal for now. I still prefer going with a side panel to launch tasks in the future, but I think the modal will be the best approach because we already have the sidebar obviously in issues. So as issues eventually transition over to more of a work item format and we lose that sidebar, I think it will make sense at that point to offer an alternative way to view this in a side panel. But for now, we'll launch it in a modal, especially since it's pretty simple in terms of layout. Hovering would show this sort of bordered outline or some sort of feedback to let them know that this is an editable field. And then also have the ability, and I don't think this is for MVC assignees, correct, Gabe? Or wait, just title, I feel like, and maybe the ability to delete and things like that.
Yeah, but we can do, we basically can roll into any of the widgets in whatever order we want once we have the basics there.
Okay, and I'm also doing some testing with these, so that's another reason why I wanted to include these, because part of what I want to understand in terms of testing is the value of this for users, and one of the most valuable parts of tasks for users is the ability to apply a weight, to break down an issue into smaller sections and then apply a weight and an assignee to each of those smaller sections. So that's another reason why this is included as part of this design. Also, I have started updating using design management as of yesterday, the designs in some of these issues. However, because they're prototypes, you may not necessarily see everything. You might have to like go into prototype mode and click and activate to see some of these panels. So I'm trying to include a screenshot as well. But if there are any questions with that, just let me know. So let's just say for now, I just went ahead and created the task. The visual here is just showing status and then the label of task or badge, I think technically it is, beside it. I do think that we'll need a different icon here. This is the icon being used for issues. And I just want to have a quick chat with the foundations team to see if there are any concerns with us either reusing an icon and how that icon is currently being used throughout the product, or if we need to come up with a different icon, but it signifies the status of the task. And then of course, this lets us know that this is a task. And eventually I think we would want to show the work item type in this badge format, regardless of bug or feature or whatever the case may be. So once it's created, they can then select it again if they choose to and have the ability to toggle a status if they want. And let me see, there was one other, oh, and then the ability to also delete. So I also included the breadcrumbs here, and I had a question about that. So previously for work items, we had explored having this ellipsis menu associated with the work item layout, and that would be similar to what we have currently for issues. It's kind of just your general actions that can be applied to that work item. So here we have a delete task as the option, just as a way to be able to remove the task. The breadcrumbs I included partly because from a build perspective, it seems like the ellipsis menu needs to be on a separate line. I could put it here to the right, but I wanted to know if there's anything specific about how that piece is built, because I am trying to reuse the GitLab UI component of the ellipsis menu. And is it tied to the breadcrumbs? currently. Can we separate those out as part of this effort? I mean, I know we can, but I don't know the complexities involved and what all is impacted by it. So that's kind of a question for the group.
I think we can and probably should. I don't know. Do you all know is there a GitLab UI component for breadcrumbs, or are we still just everywhere using the Haml version of it?
There's I believe there's a breadcrumb component. I just saw something for iterations with Simon a couple weeks ago. Let me go check.
Cool. And then also with the breadcrumbs, I partly included this as well for conversation purposes. So this is just showing that this task is the first task inside of this issue. And I intentionally put 1 and 1 to kind of show that this is a child element of the first issue. And it's unlikely that many people would see this particular scenario, but would this be an accurate representation of that visualization? If we were to include breadcrumbs, are we having hashtags for tasks? I believe that we had decided that we were. And so in which case it would kind of look like this, which I'm curious about what users would think about that, if that would be confusing to see 2 hashtags. I think the arrows help to reinforce that it's a hierarchical structure and that one is a child of the other. But again, I'm concerned that this is going to be perceived as an issue inside of an issue.
Yeah, it won't be. I mean, because the other use cases, like from a path perspective, you don't navigate to the issue then to the task, because the task is just a relationship. And so it would just be one hashtag, which would be the ID of the task, if that makes sense. Because it's also going to show up in the issue list. And then if you click through from the issue list to the task detail page, the path would basically, the breadcrumb would be different than from what it would be when you're looking at a modal here. And then also for free, it's not going to be a child relationship. It's going to be just a related thing, which is what we're doing for the MVC. Right. Yeah. So I don't think it makes sense to nest them like that in the breadcrumbs.
And that was something else that I forgot to show here is the related. So I included, just for part of the prototype testing, this tasks icon. This is an existing icon for tasks. I'm not proposing that we use that because I have a feeling that the foundations team will prefer to create a new icon, since there is already a concept of tasks and it is different from this. So that icon might change, but I wanted to just have it there for testing so that I can kind of walk through or help demonstrate what the intention is behind this icon. So it's just showing as related. And you're right, Gabe, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that we're not necessarily representing this as a child element for MVC. It is simply a related thing. So that makes sense that the breadcrumbs would not be reflected that way. As far as how this would show though in the list in relation to other issues, so I would expect for the issues icon to show here, and then potentially have a separate icon and number for tasks. The only difference that I am thinking that we would show here would be maybe an icon for tasks versus issues, but I believe this is Kristen and Alexis. So this isn't necessarily a proposal. Is that correct, Gabe, that they're handling all of that?
Yeah, and I would probably, I think it's fine to put the type icon in there and they'll handle it all, but I don't know if we're going to want to have counters for every type of thing, right? Because then if you have, let's say, I don't know, 10 different types of work items, you know, we'll have like, it's just going to get noisy. And right now we just have the issue icon, which is, I think will evolve to be the work item icon, right? So we just want to show the count of work items. But for the MVC, if we want to show the task icon, I think that's a good visual indicator to the user, but that's just my 2 cents.
So you're saying we would potentially show it in the list here, but not necessarily in association with a counter at the top?
Yeah, because we already have a counter at the top for issues, which is technically going to just become work items, right? But it is up to Kristen and Alexis because they are redesigning this relationship widget thingy. So
yeah, cool.
So sorry. For MVC, are we saying then that we may not need to add it as a related item? Or are we saying we should have it, it's just going to be handled by the product planning team?
When we create the task, we want to create it with the relationship of related. That's the MVC. So it should theoretically, if we don't even change anything else down there in the like linked items widget, we still should be able to create the task with the relationship of related, right?
Okay, but we don't need to necessarily show it as related because we're kind of showing it as related in the description, right? With the modifications to the description.
Right, but that can be like, you can edit the markdown or remove the GitLab flavor markdown reference to the issue, right? And if you do that, or if you add things, I think we do want to show, we basically don't want to change any existing behavior of how linked items work. So once you do relate it, it will also show up in the linked items widget, right? Because that's where you manage the relationship, for whatever it is. So the reason why we're converting the markdown task to a work item is so that we can then have the new work item create view and work on that, iterate on it side by side with the work item detail view without having to interrupt our existing issue creation flow that is legacy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if someone goes in and deletes the markdown reference to a task, it will stay as a related item task within that issue.
Correct.
Okay. That makes sense.
I think you asked a good question though, Donald, because this is a presentation primarily of the view of the task and not so much of that related aspect. How soon do you need the designs for that related aspect in order to be able to move forward? So I think Alexis is out maybe through next week. So I don't know if I need to chat with Kristen, Gabe, and
I mean, honestly, like we don't have, if when we have the create work item mutation, if there's some way to specify the type of relationship when creating it, right? So just like you might eventually want to be able to create a new issue that's blocking from the relationship widget, it's going to be the same sort of thing where you select the relationship type, then you create the work item. Just like eventually it'll be create a new child task or new child work item from the Epic view. So I don't think we have to even touch it as long as we can make it related when we're creating the task. And then they can kind of work out on it at their own pace is what I would ideally like to have happen, right? Because even if we don't show the icon, the task icon yet in the linked items list, it should still behave the same way as when I link an issue or relate an issue to another issue. Does that make sense? So it would still show up in that area and you can click the X to remove that relationship.
okay. One other thing I wanted to note is when they go in to edit, if they choose to delete, my expectation, sorry, my prototype's weird. My expectation if they chose to delete like this, for example, would be that refined mockups for form would simply revert back to a text line because the object would be deleted, but I don't want to assume that they want to delete the checklist item. And I'm curious about the complexity of that, or if anybody has any thoughts on that approach, because again, to me, delete is deleting the object, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to delete it from the checklist. Those are two separate things. I would expect if they want to remove it from the checklist that they could go into Markdown and just remove it like any other checklist item.
Right now, how it behaves, I tested this out. If let's say I use a GitLab flavored markdown reference to an issue before you even do this, and I put it in a checklist, right? And then I go delete that issue that's referenced in another issue's description, it still has a hyperlink that goes to a 404 page because basically the ID, the path doesn't exist anymore because it's been deleted. So that's how it currently behaves. And if we do anything beyond that, it's sort of almost like an enhancement.
I don't like that approach though. That feels like if you don't know that it's been deleted, does it change? And I'll need to test this myself. That's a good idea to do that. Does it change the view of the text at all? Like I know when something's been closed, it shows closed in parentheses. It doesn't show deleted.
It doesn't show anything because you would have to have a record to show that it was deleted. Sense, right? Because once it's gone, it's gone.
Okay. So we don't track that in any way. Like I'm guessing that we've got a record that it's been deleted, but but we don't
Uh,
necessarily tie into that somehow in the code.
I don't think
I'm
so.
using the wrong words. Okay. Yeah, I want to create an issue about that because I don't love that experience. I feel like if you don't know that it's been deleted and you click on it, you may just believe that the product is broken somehow. I would prefer that they get some sort of notification that it's been removed. But that being said, for MVC, I want to be mindful of our timelines. So if we have to go with that for MVC, because that's existing behavior, just for time's sake, I'm okay with that. And then I'll create a separate issue to follow up with a better approach to handle that situation. Thoughts on that?
We can let the engineers guide us here, but I think if we were to fix it and remove the reference, we'd have to then, when you delete, we'd have to fire a background job or something like that to go look across all issues that may contain a reference to the deleted issue, to then convert it from the reference to plain text or something like that, which gets sort of even more confusing, because what you're storing right here, when you show the refined mockups for form, you're not in the code or in the markdown, it's going to be a link to the issue. It's not actual text, right? It's a reference. So we'd have to figure out how to handle that when you do remove the reference. Like, do you just put in what was the former title there as plain text? Or, I mean, there's a lot of sort of nuances about it, but I'm open to explore how to make it a better experience. It's just non-trivial in my opinion.
I'd love to hear what the engineers think.
Sorry, I was distracted, but I feel like that is, I think we're gonna have to get back on input on that and how they want to handle referencing on there. So I think we should table that question until we have back-end engineers with us.
I knew I should have invited them. I almost did. And then I thought, well, I don't know how much they need to know when it's looking at the front end. I knew I should have included them. So I'll definitely share this with Jake and get his thoughts. And there is also separately the issue for deleting a task. So maybe we can continue the conversation there, and I'll just tag Jake in that also. But that being said, for deleted, and I'll mention this also in that issue, I would also expect for the icon and the label to be removed too. So it sounds like maybe there's just more discussion that needs to happen there. From a mobile perspective, oh, actually, let me open this back up. The design for these, let me actually restart this. I am right now for MVC expecting it to be very similar to the experience that people have when they go to edit a board. So you just have the kind of drop down. When you edit a board, obviously you have a modal that pops up, and then you've got drop downs inside of the modal. So again, to keep it lean, I'm going with existing GitLab UI components to be able to just go in and edit weight and assignees using those existing experiences. For mobile, it would be very similar to what we've already examined for work items. This is the older work item design. Go ahead, Gabe.
I was just going to say before I forget, the assignee, or not the assignee, but the weight input, it's just an input field, not a drop down, because there's not a predefined set of options, if that makes sense.
So
it just accepts a valid positive integer.
So I'm glad you said that, because it is a drop down for editing a board. And I thought that was an odd approach.
It is odd. It's, I guess, making it so that it's easy to pick from a list of options. And down the road, we want to provide a few different preset set of options, like the Fibonacci sequence and some other things like that, but we're not there right now. And so if we were to enforce a type, I've seen even at GitLab a team that uses hundreds and thousands as weights, because I think they do some weird time conversion or something like that. And so it would be a regression if we remove the ability to insert whatever positive integer the user wants.
I'm glad you said that. So I definitely agree with you. I prefer that we go with an input as opposed to a drop down, especially for that reason. So you don't have to try to scroll through a ridiculous number to get to your weight. So is that going to add to scope at all, or is that something that we can pull from existing components and still be in our
So, I mean, I think there's two different use cases. In this, weight is similar to the option we have in the issue sidebar now. The reason it's the drop down in filtered search and board scope is because we needed a way to have the none and any options. We could have probably auto completed to that. But we chose to do the drop down. So I think in this case, it will not add any scope if we just allow free text. And that's what we want to do because we don't want to, there's no option. There shouldn't be an option for any or none.
Excellent. Then I'll update my designs to just be an input field for that. And again, this is the older design from the original work items. I do have a view in Figma, and I think I shared this in the meeting invite, just in case anybody wants to look at the Figma file. You're welcome to just dive in and post comments, questions at any point. But the mobile view would be very similar to the work item view from before, in that we would still have the ellipsis menu up here with the ability to delete. The primary difference, though, would be, and that's why I'm pulling up the prototype from this, sort of a swiping effect. So rather than having the pop-up that just kind of overlays, having sort of a page that like replaces with that panel. And I'm curious if there are any questions or concerns about that from a build perspective, because it would be more of a screen replacement or an overlay experience rather than just like a pop-over kind of thing. I would expect it to just be front end and CSS, but I know just enough coding to be dangerous in that regard. So I don't want to make that assumption. And let me know if I can explain that better. Like this has the animation. I don't know why the animation is missing from here, but it would just be some sort of, maybe quick animating experience that just shows the panel slide in with the edit options for assignees or whatever the widget may be. And I know we've also talked about the create view and the edit view are going to be the same. So I don't know if that adds complexity as well.
On the animation part, or the animation side, do we have any other places where we use, like, it's not hard to implement, it's just hard to tweak to get the right, because you don't want to have one animation on one page be like the transition be super quick, and then on another page it be slow, or it's just gonna be jarring as on the UX side of things.
I agree. I would expect it to be similar to, I feel like we've got this for requirements. It's not really, that was it just kind of pops out. Yeah, we've got a little bit of an animation where it just kind of pops in and pops out. That's what I would expect is similar to that. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, we can reuse that, but we don't have anything like within pajamas or any type of like UX requirements on speeds and transition times or anything like that, anything around animations.
So what would be helpful in that regard? Would it be helpful for me to create a document outlining the details of that, or should I go back to foundations and have them start to put something into, I guess eventually we want something in pajamas either way, but
yeah, like in our style guide, we probably want something. So I don't think we need anything right now, but if we're the first ones to really use animation on the product, maybe that's something we want to do in the future.
I need to disagree with Donald a bit. We're not using it currently a lot within GitLab, but there is a component in GitLab UI called GL Drawer, which was supposed to be the sidebar implementation, but it didn't happen. And I can see that it has a transition within it. So we can reuse it because it should be pajamas compliant because it's GitLab UI component. I think we can use it as an official solution for this with no added cost.
Would we use GL Drawer for for this or
Not
just
maybe in the future, because from what I understand, model is just the first iteration for the MVC, and we are still going to use the sidebar implementation, right? At the end, so we can reuse a GL drawer for this, not for the MVC.
cool. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, one potential issue though could be that with DL drawer, I think the pop-up drawer has got a specific width. So if your mobile screen is a bit bigger than that, then the drawer won't cover the whole width of the mobile. So that might be something that we might want to possibly enhance with DL drawer if we wanted the drawer to fill the whole screen of a mobile.
I think it would be good addition to the GitLab UI itself. It's not only for our case, it's just generally better for the UX.
I know we've only got about 2 minutes left. So what questions do you all have? What details can I flesh out? Because I feel like as I'm walking through this, I feel like there are still some unknowns that I have, simply because I need to get feedback from users as to a couple of these things. What unknowns do you all have? What questions can I answer? Is there any extra design that I can provide or any extra detail that I can provide that would be helpful?
From my side, I have questions mostly for the backend, especially for like we delete just the text from the markdown, what is going to happen. I am sure that they can implement this. Like right now, if you edit the description of the issue and you remove the related issue, it relates to, they remove it from the relationship, but this is something to be defined by the backend. From the design standpoint, I don't think I have any specific questions. Everything is clear so far. Thank you, Holly. It was a really nice presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for attending and asking questions.
Cool. Well, if there are any other questions, we can continue in the separate issues. But yeah, this was great as kind of a kickoff to see the designs. Like Natalia said, I think the next step is to get back and input on a lot of these things. But from a design perspective, I think we're at a good place.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I'll share this recording in a couple of our Slack channels. I know we've got a front end channel. Is there a back end channel as well? I assume I'm not in that one. If there is.
Yeah, there's an splan_BE. I think it's the same as front end, just with BE instead.
I'll share it in there as well, and then also tag Jake in a couple of the deleted questions that we had in that deleted issue, that is. And if there's anything else that you all need from me at any point, please feel free to ping me. I feel like I'm kind of drowning in issues these days, so I have a tendency to find myself feeling scattered, trying to just stay on top of it all, and never ever intend to neglect conversations with you all. So please let me know if there's anything at any point that you need, and I'm completely happy to drop everything and help any way that I can.
Perfect.
All right, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.